Thank y'all for coming to the SMS, which at the Church Health Center stands for the Scott Morris Society. That was not my idea, but it's so nice that y'all want to be a member of the Scott Morris Society, because at the Church Health Center, that constitutes everybody who gives $25,000 a year to the Church Health Center. So that's really nice that y'all have signed up. And if you want to talk to Ken Hall, he's with me right here. And okay. So I do feel like I'm talking to an amazing group of experts around the issues of selling and marketing, and it's really nice that y'all gave us this free consult today, and I'm really eager to hear what you have to say. But I will tell you a little bit about our work, and I don't know how often you have not-for-profit folks come to talk to you, because it, on one level, doesn't make any sense, but on another level, it does. There are a few things that I take pride in, truthfully, almost nothing, but one of the things I actually do have pride in is that I am a member of the Society of Entrepreneurs, and here in Memphis, the people who have built the major companies in Memphis have seen fit that the work of the Church Health Center is an entrepreneurial endeavor. And not only am I a member of the society, I'm actually a master entrepreneur, for which that's me and Fred Smith and Pitt Hyde and a few others, which is pretty cool for me. But so you judge for yourself as to why this makes any sense. But I want to start by telling you a story that I think is relevant, and even if it's not necessarily relevant to the topic, you need to know this story. I think you need to know this story. So William Austin was a tenant farmer in Covington, Tennessee. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, he was a sharecropper, and as the way it works with sharecropping, or did work with sharecropping, thankfully we're talking in the past tense mostly, he had 17 children. The reason you have 17 children is because you need a workforce. You don't get to just go out and hire it. The whole tenant farming thing is the formula is such you can't make any money, and really the more work you do, the more you owe. That was certainly the case for him. And so in the late 1950s, a couple of his sons said, this life's not for me. I'm leaving, and I'm going to Memphis. And they moved to Memphis, and they started working, and then they convinced their father that he needed to give up sharecropping and come to Memphis, which is what he did, and he became a sanitation worker. And so he was a sanitation worker in the early 60s. A lot of his children stayed in Covington, but as his children got married and had children, every Sunday afternoon, Mr. Austin would bring his grandchildren together, and they would gather around him, and he would talk to them. And mostly what he talked to them was about the nature of how you treat other people. He talked about kindness and goodness. He talked about how you judge people one-on-one. And he talked to them about how everybody's the same. And over time, he came to including white people. Because he didn't think that most of his life, but as a sanitation worker, he never knew the man's name, but there was a white minister who the other sanitation workers referred to as their secret weapon. And what they meant by that is this white minister was friends with Mayor Loeb, and during the sanitation strike, they knew that this white minister was talking to Mayor Loeb and advocating for their cause. So, as it so happens, one of his grandchildren's name is James Macklin. And so James's mother never left Covington. She married a man there. He was born in Covington, grew up, went to Covington High School, always remembered his times with his grandfather, who, as it turns out, died when James was only 12. But James played football at Covington High School and then got a scholarship to play at the University of Memphis. When he graduated at the University of Memphis, he got a job out of college. Then he worked for a number of years in Arkansas, and then he got a job at Mid-America Apartments. He got a very good job at Mid-America. This was 1997. 1997. So he worked hard, he saved his money. While there, he became friends with a guy named Frank McRae, who was very close to James very quickly. They had a lot in common. Frank's job was sort of to be the corporate chaplain, if you will. And they talked, and James told Frank about his grandfather. And then I find this remarkable. In 1999, James paid off the debt that his grandfather owed as a sharecropper. He still owed $16,000. You know, he could have easily walked away from this, but he didn't. He paid off his grandfather's debt so that his grandmother would be debt-free. So he and Frank become friends. They tell each other their story. And James learns that Frank, in 1968, was the youngest district superintendent of the United Methodist Church in the world. And he had a very unusual role in all this. He was very much a civil rights activist. He was very good friends with Mayor Loeb, and he ran shuttle diplomacy between Loeb's camp and the King camp. When they would each have a proposal, it was Frank McRae who took the idea back and forth. And as James heard this, he realized that his grandfather had talked to him about there was one good white man. And it was Frank McRae, his new friend, who he then introduced to his grandmother before she died. And then, when I first came to Memphis in 1986, it was Frank McRae who took me on to help me become the associate pastor of the church that he was the senior pastor. And I'll tell more about that in a minute. And then Frank McRae died on Tuesday. And tomorrow is his funeral. And James Macklin will be a pallbearer. Now, I find that to be a powerful story on multiple levels. And I think it's exactly what I'm here to talk about how the Church Health Center works and why it works. So the issue of how I got to Memphis and why Frank and others were willing to support our work. Well, with Frank, I knew his role in the sanitation strike, and so I said to him, the Church Health Center will be here to provide health care for people like the sanitation workers. That's really all it took, and he wanted to be a part of our work. So how did I get to Memphis? Because I'm not from Memphis. I grew up in Atlanta. I was always interested in the church, but the thought of preaching 52 sermons a year sent shivers down my spine. It still does. I don't know how anybody could do that. But I read the Bible, and I saw this stuff in there about healing. It's on every page. You know, a third of the Bible has to do with healing the sick. But I would look around to see what churches did, and there wasn't much to it. We would pray for people on Sunday morning. The pastor was expected to visit people in the hospital. A few people visited the shut-ins, and that defined our healing ministry. It seemed to me that there ought to be more to it than that. So I went on and go to college thinking, how could I be professionally involved in the church without having to preach? It was either that or pitch for the Atlanta Braves, and to this day, I don't understand why the Braves didn't call me, but they didn't. So I go to college and I go to seminary, and I spend most of my time in seminary looking at what the church has historically done, and came to realize that there is a reason these hospitals have church names on them. We've just forgotten what it is. We've actually come to believe philosophically in Plato and Descartes, because the two of them taught us that you can take a human being and separate us into a body and a spirit. And we put the body on one side and said it was the purview of science and medicine. We put the spirit on the other, said it's okay for the church to mess around with your spirit, but heaven forbid it cross this line and care about our bodies. Well, that is a fundamentally non-Christian, non-Jewish, non-Muslim, non-Hindu idea. We all intuitively know there's something wrong with it, that what affects my body affects my spirit and vice versa, and yet that's not how we live our lives. You know, strictly just pointing out the food piece. You know, the least healthy meal you could eat every week is at your church. You know, it shouldn't be that way. You know, we have blessed the sin of gluttony for the sake of fellowship. You know, in the midst of the obesity epidemic in America, clergy are 20% heavier than the rest of the population. You know, how can we let that happen go forward? We can't. So this is what I do in seminary, thinking about this. And then one day I'm in the chaplain's office at the Yale Medical School, and I look on his desk and there's a little pamphlet that says how to start a church-based health clinic. And I go, that's it. That's what I want to do. So it was written by a Lutheran pastor in Chicago. So I go and meet him and I engage with him, and I realize that there's an underground movement around America, around the link between faith and health. Who would know that? But it's there. And I meet a lot of other people. And over the years, I steal the best ideas I can. I merge them with my own ideas. I finished medical school. I do my residency. I'm ready to start. I want to stay in the South. I don't want to go back to Atlanta because it had gotten to be too big. And then I read somewhere that Memphis is the poorest major city in America. And based on that, I said, I'm going to Memphis. I was 33 years old. I was too young, too dumb to realize that what I wanted to do had no chance of succeeding. So I come to Memphis like with $30 in my pocket. I'm knocking on doors, selling out of a completely empty cart, telling people about why they want to help me create this thing. And so from a sales point of view, I've got to believe you would have done the same thing I did. You know, I'm going to start something called the Church Health Center. It's going to have a cross in its logo. It's going to be led by a Methodist minister. So I go to the most obvious place for funding, a Jewish family foundation. And they gave me the money. They gave me the money. The Plow Foundation gave the first money to start the Church Health Center, $100,000. So our focus then, as it is now, is really on what I'm talking about here. So the reason the Plow Foundation was willing to do this is because Jocelyn Rudner is such an unbelievably wonderful person to start with. But she could see the passion that I had. So in my opinion, passion can cover up a lot of mistakes. You know, if you have passion for the product you're selling, I think that goes a long way. You know, you got to be able to understand the person you're talking to. So I did understand what Jocelyn cared about. I learned that fairly quickly. But then there's just, you got to have an idea that's needed. And when you're dealing with the poorest major city in America, and who we were focused on then, as it's the case today, the people who work to make our lives comfortable. You know, they cook your food, they take care of your kids, your grandkids, they will one day dig your grave, they don't complain. They don't complain. Yet when they get sick, their options are very few. That was the case in 1987 when we opened our doors, and I promise you that's the case now and moving forward. The Affordable Care Act is not putting us out of business. We can talk more about that if you want to, but instead we got to get bigger. We got to get bigger. So from there, I just went door to door to door trying to get people to buy into what we do. You know, I would ask, whatever your skill set was, surely you've got some way you could help us. It wasn't just about writing checks. You know, if somebody a lot smarter than me told me when we were getting started that I was going to have 3 problems. They were going to be personnel, personnel, and personnel. Well, I never had a real job myself, so how was I going to know about that? So I went looking for somebody who could help me deal with that personnel stuff. That was the selling, that was the gift I was looking for them. You know, who would have thought that the Central Gardens Neighborhood Association would have, through the roof, opposed our opening our doors? But they did. They did, and I mean, we ended up having to get a special use permit and go to city council, and there were as many people in the city council chambers as you could imagine. Somebody literally stood up and said, if you let this thing happen, what will occur is that, quote unquote, young bucks will drop their mother off and go thieving through the neighborhood. That was said. Now, to everybody's credit, there is not a single person, including the person who said that, who did not eventually either apologize, become a volunteer, or become a donor to the Church Health Center. 100% of those people did that. Because they didn't understand what we were doing. I mean, I get that it wasn't the norm, but they get it over time, and over time, people get an opportunity to correct their mistakes, I hope. So we opened our doors, and 12 people came. That was the first day we were open. It's the fewest we've ever seen. So 27 years later, there are over 60,000 people in Memphis who depend on the Church Health Center. We're their doctor. We're their doctors. So these are all people working in low-wage jobs. In our attitude, if you're willing to clean out my latrine and you get sick, we think you ought to go to the front of the line. Just one comment about the Affordable Care Act. This is not bashing at all. This is just the reality of it is. But because of Tennessee's failure to expand Medicaid, if you make $30,000 and you're married and you got 2 kids, and you go to healthcare.gov, which you can't do now until November, but when it was up and going, if you could do that. And so how does healthcare.gov work? You go, you put in your information, it gives you insurance policies that you could buy, and then if you're within certain categories, you get a subsidy from the federal government to go buy the policy, right? So you make $30,000, you're married, you got 2 kids, you go to healthcare.gov in Memphis, Tennessee, and your subsidy will be zero. Zero. The poorest people get nothing. It is so hard to believe. I didn't make that up. 90% of the patients who come to the Church Health Center, if they go to healthcare.gov, their subsidy will be zero. You understand why we're not going away? There are other things we do. Dentistry. In 2,500 pages of the law, the words adult dentistry do not appear, not in there. We consider dentistry to be an economic issue. I can't go from a $7 an hour job to a $10 an hour job if my teeth are all messed up. Not going to happen. I got a guy who not that long ago comes to see me. He has dental pain. He actually works for one of our volunteers. He goes to the dentist. He can't afford the dentist. So he took matters into his own hands and he superglued his teeth together. What he doesn't understand is that superglue will eat away all the enamel in your mouth. So his mouth is a total disaster. This is America. When did it get to be that I'm working, I'm taking care of my family, I'm doing the best I can, I have dental pain, which is one of the worst pains you can have, and my only option is to superglue my mouth? That is not okay. So the Church Health Center is the only game in town that cares about that. We've recently grown from 3 dental chairs to 6 dental chairs to 10 dental chairs to our new venture will be 20 dental chairs because this matters. And the same thing's true about eye care. Scary how many people are out there driving trucks who can't see past the end of their hand. You want us to make those people glasses, but that's not in the law. Counseling, issues of substance abuse, not there. So there's a lot more. I don't have time to tell you. But so here's what I need your help on the sales and marketing thing. We have put all our chips in the middle of the table, and we're playing for a really big prize to grow the work of the Church Health Center. In my opinion, to make Memphis better is we're moving everything at the Church Health Center to Sears Crosstown. Hope you've heard about this. So thank you, great. So for those of you who've never seen Sears Crosstown, it's in North Memphis at North Parkway in Cleveland. It's called Crosstown because that's where all the buses used to cross. So it's an ideal location for us. It's in a building that was built by Sears in 1928. It's been abandoned for over 20 years. The building is 1.5 million square feet. It is bigger than the Chrysler Building. It is 5 Clark Towers. It is 26 football fields. It is big. Now, there were 10 of these buildings built in the 1920s. They all had the same architect. They all look the same. 4 have already been redeveloped: Seattle, Minneapolis, Boston, Dallas. The one in Seattle is the home office of Starbucks. The one in Minneapolis is in a part of town that was once known as Murderopolis. But just the redevelopment of that building changed that part of town. The one in Atlanta is over 2 million square feet. It's the largest brick building in the world, and it's going to open within the next 6 months, called Ponce Market. So what's going to happen in Memphis at Sears Crosstown? So the Church Health Center will be the anchor tenant at Crosstown, but we won't be the only ones there. So we operate in 14 buildings. It's unbelievably inefficient, and for a while we've been thinking about how would we move everything we do under one roof. So one option would have been to go build a building that was just the Church Health Center. That would have been easier. It wouldn't have been better. It wouldn't have been better. For some of you may be aware of folks that are often referred to as the Desert Fathers. In the 3rd or 4th century, there are people who lived out in the desert in Egypt and the Middle East, and for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they would live alone in the desert trying to commune with God to get closer to God. These people, when they came back to civilization, if you read what they wrote, almost without exception, do you know what they said? They said that was a total waste of time. You know, I didn't feel closer to God out in the desert. I felt alone. I missed my family. I missed my community. I missed my church. I missed those things that brought me closer to God. We need community to be faithful. I'm totally convinced we need community to be healthy. You know, nobody's life is made better by being on a stair stepper with headphones. That in and of itself doesn't make any of us healthier. But I also now believe it is true about institutions. The Church Health Center will be better by being in community with other entities with a shared purpose. So for the last 2 years now, I've been out trying to ask, who do I want to live with? You know, it's been a dating process, and it's been a great experience. And we are about to be married to Methodist Hospital, Rhodes College, St. Jude, ALSAC, the Memphis Teacher Residency, Teach for America. There will be 2 charter schools. And then there will be the magic, which I consider will happen in 260 apartments, intentionally designed for young doctors, young artists, young educators. Yeah. Right. This will be the coolest building in Memphis, no question about it, but it's more about the transformative nature. The youth living in this building will be attacking the brain drain. It will be drawing the best and brightest that Memphis produces back to our city for us to be a better city. You know, it will be a vertical urban village built around health, education, and the arts. So it's a little small $200 million project. The money is there. The money is there. That's not an issue. So it's the most complicated real estate deal in the history of Memphis. Not making that up. So the building, he hates for people to underline this, but it's public knowledge, is owned by Staley Cates. He and others like him have put in a ridiculous amount of philanthropic dollars into this. So this project makes no business sense. Nobody needs to think it does. It doesn't. So, but it does work once there are philanthropic dollars there. There are then new market tax credits, historic tax credits. The city's put in $15 million. The county's put in $5 million. There will then be an $85 million loan that is guaranteed by long-term leases that have been signed coming from the anchor tenants. The building's full. Ridiculous, but the building's full. Nobody's trying to rent space in this building anymore. So when is it going to happen? So yeah, right. So timing. You remember when the government shut down? Okay. Well, there are actually consequences to stuff like that, and one of them is that the new market tax credits got delayed about 4 to 6 months. So we were actually hoping to break ground like right now this week, but the nature of new market tax credits is you can't break ground till you actually have them in hand. So it's there, they're committed, but it's going to be later this summer or October at the latest before that will happen. So but from the day the first shovel goes in the ground, it will be 2 years, a year to build out the core and shell, and then a year for tenant improvement. So toward the latter half of 2016 is when I hope you will all come to an amazing celebration. So the Church Health Center is having to raise $100 million just for our piece of this ridiculous puzzle. So that's what I need your selling and marketing strategy and help with. You know, even I think $100 million is a lot of money, but we're going to do it. We're absolutely going to do it because of Mr. Austin, who I began telling you about. You know, that's why this makes any sense. You know, Mr. Austin and his children and his grandchildren, who I'm now their doctor. I can't tell you how many patients I've seen over the years who picked cotton growing up, and then they're doing the jobs that nobody else is willing to do. And we need them. They're the backbone of our society. You care about them. They're people you know. I guarantee you that I'm the doctor for people you know. Maybe your children. They may have come to me and you didn't know it. But that's why we're doing this, and that's why we're going to do it for a long time to come. So. Anyway, thanks for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
And at that time, Memphis was the poorest city.
Right.
Currently, we're still the poorest city.
Yeah, over those 27 years, there have been times we've fallen as low as 3. Behind San Antonio and New Orleans after Katrina, but you're right, by God, we have claimed our right as number 1.
But I guess what's been the same over those 27 years and what has changed? Keep us there.
Yeah, so, you know, I can answer that question with I can point to one thing that I think is the biggest difference. So, are you familiar with an organization called 100 Black Men? You know that 100 Black Men? Okay, 100 Black Men are young, upwardly mobile, entrepreneurial African-American men. In Atlanta, there are between 2,000 and 3,000 members of 100 Black Men. In Memphis, we got 51. We got 51. I mean, without African-American entrepreneurial businesses, we are stuck in the mud. That's what I think. You know, I was talking to Staley one time a few years ago about this and go, Staley, we got to work to help 100 Black men be stronger. And he stops me in mid-sentence and goes, do you hear yourself? I mean, how exactly are 2 white guys going to help 100 black men grow? I can't do that. So what we have to do is address issues of education. You know, this thing is all driven by education, I think. You know, and how anybody can sit with complacency and watch what's happening with our educational system and go, oh, that had nothing to do with me because I got no kids. Well, I guarantee it's affecting your business. That's a 100% guarantee. That's my opinion. But look, I also think it's solvable. I think it's solvable. I think what Crosstown is going to do is it's going to be an economic engine, but it's mostly going to be a thought engine. The thought engine, and most of you in this room are too old to make the difference, but the young people who are going to be she's not, you are, she's not. That's how we're going to do this. I'm convinced of it. Great. Anybody else? Right, well, I'm happy to stay around. Oh, wait, one more question. Okay.
You talk about partnering with other entities in the city that have the same kinds of effects. Do you partner in any way with some of the other larger health providers or anyone like that?
Yeah, so
Great
John,
relationship.
right, so John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, said, if your heart is like my heart, then give me your hand. That is totally how we do this. You know, you want to work with us and you have similar values, you see the link between faith and health, then we're with you. Now, what that means is that I end up working with people who I personally think their theology of their point of view is nuts, but I consider that to be God's problem and not mine. So, yeah, you got a better tent, we'll come under your tent. In the Christ community, we work with, my senior staff is at a meeting with them as we speak. So, yes, absolutely. So Methodist, Baptist, St. Francis, they all support the Church Health Center, but it's got to be more than just the hospitals. You know, health is ultimately about not just the absence of disease. It's about how do you live the life well lived. You know, nobody in here cares about whether you got disease. What you care about is how am I going to be happy moving forward? Joy is the thing that brings about health. You know, who cares if you live 2 years longer if it means 2 years longer in a nursing home? You know, life for life's sake makes no sense. Breathing in, breathing out, I'm not signing up for that, neither are you. You know, what we ought to be about is helping people achieve what we would consider to be the goals for living. Having more joy in your life, having more love in your life, and being driven closer to God. If those things aren't happening, then what's the point? What is the point? So yeah, we'll work with anybody who is committed to that. So, great. Yeah, one more. Yes, sir.
Doctor, what is your staffing complement now? It's grown from the infancy to what it is now. How many people do you have working with you?
Great.
Also,
Yeah. Good. So we have 6. When we started, we had 6 employees. We now have a little over 250. We have 10 physicians that are on our staff. This is their job, plus a general surgeon. We have 1,000 doctors who volunteer with us. And then something I would have never predicted is we have 52 subspecialty clinics that are staffed with retired doctors. You know, the people who were the best doctors in Memphis, they retired 2 years ago. They go out and they play golf for 6 months, and they call me and say, I'm bored to tears, and there's something I can do. And so the only way you get to see those doctors is at the Church Health Center. That's pretty cool. So, yeah, great. All right, y'all, I'm happy to stay around, but one more. Okay, Mark, boss.
In my introduction, I meant to plug your newest book, but I forgot, so you plug it in your newest book.
Absolutely. We've got a new part of the Church Health Center is referred to as knowledge ministry. You know, despite what you may have thought with what I'm talking about, the Church Health Center is not about solving the great social problems in America. We do not know how to do that. The only thing we care about doing is engaging the faith community with how do we live the life well lived? As people of faith, how do we create health ministry? And what does that look like? Because we believe if we're successful at this, it actually would have big impact on the great social problems in America. But we just want to focus on what we know best, which is the community of faith. So to do that, we've now become a publishing engine. The Church Health Center internally publishes a ton of stuff. And if you're interested in all about this, you know, we have multiple websites, but you go to churchhealthcenter.org, but we publish a magazine, which is called Church Health Reader. There's a print version. What we care more about is you go into the web version, but the URL is chreader.org. And then, to your point, I do publish out in the real world with other stuff, just got stuff. And the last book I had is called God, Health, and Happiness, which you can get from Amazon or you can order from us or, I don't know, Davis Kid, whatever. What are they called now? Booksellers of Laurelwood, that they would have it. Okay, great. Thank y'all.